Welcome to the deep dive. We've got some really interesting sources you sent over, focusing on a pretty hot topic right now, the future of U.S. national forests.
That's right. It seems to be stirring up quite a bit of debate.
Specifically, we're going to dive into the Trump administration's plan to potentially roll back the long-standing roadless rule.
A rule that's been in place for quite some time.
Exactly. And we're not talking small potatoes here. This affects vast areas, nearly 59 million acres of national forest land. Land that right now is protected from, new roads being built or timber being harvested on a large scale.
Significant protections.
So our mission today really is to unpack this, look at the history of the rule, figure out the reasons behind this potential change, and explore, well, the reactions and what it might all mean. We're drawing from reports you sent from Earth.org and NPR.
Sounds good. It's a complex issue with deep roots.
Okay, let's unpack this. So to really get why this current move is such a big deal, we probably need to go back to when the roadless rule actually started.
Definitely. You have to understand the context.
This was a Clinton administration policy, right, back in 2001. And it essentially stopped logging and new road construction in huge parts of the national forests.
It did. A landmark move at the time. It specifically prohibited road building, reconstruction, and timber harvesting on, well, the numbers vary slightly. Earth.org says nearly 59 million acres. NPR mentions 58 million. But the key point is it effectively created what some call de facto wilderness protections.
De facto wilderness, meaning not officially designated, but managed like it.
Precisely. Managed as if they were wilderness. This safeguarded some really pristine areas, especially out west and in Alaska.
And the public reaction back then, I mean, the sources mentioned over 1.6 million public comments supporting it.
Yeah, an incredible number. More than for any other rule in U.S. history, apparently.
That's staggering. It really tells you something about how people felt or still feel about these wild places.
It absolutely does. It shows a deep public value placed on these, undeveloped lands. But it's also crucial to remember it wasn't universally popular. Not by a long shot.
Ah, right. The opposition.
Exactly. From day one, really. Republican states, industry groups, they've been fighting it for decades, filed, over a dozen lawsuits, all unsuccessful but persistent.
And their main argument was what? That Clinton overstepped.
Basically, yeah. They claimed he usurped power reserved for Congress in the Wilderness Act. So it's this fundamental clash over executive versus legislative power in managing public lands alongside the conservation versus development debate.
Okay, so that brings us pretty much up to speed. Now, the current administration, through Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins, signals they want to rescind this rule after nearly a quarter century.
That's the announcement. And Secretary Rollins, who oversees the Forest Service, has been quite clear about the administration's reasoning, or at least the stated reasoning.
Which is?
She described the roadless rule as overly restrictive. The main justification given is better fire management.
Fire management. Okay.
Yes. Particularly citing places like Utah, Montana, and the Tongass National Forest in Alaska, where you have large protected areas under the rule. The specific claim is that the rule prohibits the Forest Service from thinning and cutting trees to prevent wildfires.
And that it limits access for firefighters.
And limits firefighter access to, quickly put them out. So it's framed as a safety and practical land management issue.
And this isn't happening in a vacuum, right?
Sorry.
You mentioned other moves.
No, it follows a pattern. There was a March executive order, an April memo from Rollins herself, both sort of laying the groundwork for potentially increasing industrial logging on federal lands.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because the reaction from environmental groups was, well, immediate.
Swift and strong, yes. They've made it very clear they're ready for a legal fight.
So what are their main concerns?
Well, groups like Earth Justice, the Sierra Club, they're raising major alarms. Drew Caputo from Earth Justice put it plainly. The rule has protected 58 million acres of our wildest national forest lands from clear-cutting for more than a generation.
So they see this as purely about logging.
That's certainly the core accusation. They argued the administration wants to, quote, throw these forest protections overboard so the timber industry can make huge money from unrestrained logging.
Strong words.
Very. They emphasize these are public lands, lands that belong to all Americans, not the timber industry. Alex Craven from the Sierra Club went further, calling it a corporate giveaway for his billionaire buddies.
And beyond this sort of corporate motive argument, what about the actual environmental impacts they're worried about?
They're talking pollution, for one, Air and drinking water potentially contaminated by more timber and mining activities if those roads go in.
And wildlife.
Big concerns there, too. They list specific examples: California condors, grizzly bears, wolves near Yellowstone, native salmon and trout out in the Pacific Northwest, even migratory songbirds in the Appalachians. It's about habitat loss, essentially.
Okay. And the climate change angle, does that come up?
Absolutely. They directly link potential deforestation from logging to higher carbon emissions. Trees store carbon, cutting them releases CO2. It's a direct climate impact they're highlighting.
But what about the administration's main point, the wildfire argument? How do environmental groups respond to that?
Well, they challenge that head on. They point to research suggesting that most wildfires actually start near existing roads and settlements.
Not deep in the roadless areas.
Not necessarily, according to their sources. The argument is that building more roads might not solve the problem and could even exacerbate it by providing more ignition points.
That's a direct contradiction.
It is, and groups like the Center for Biological Diversity add another layer. They argue that decades of, past logging, aggressive fire suppression, and livestock grazing have actually dried out many forests, making them more prone to large, intense fires.
So they're saying past management, including logging, might be part of the problem the administration now claims logging will fix.
That's essentially the counter-narrative. It suggests the root causes of severe wildfires are complex and perhaps not best addressed simply by opening up roadless areas. It fundamentally questions the premise of the rollback justification.
And the legal threat remains very real.
Oh, absolutely. Drew Caputo from Earth Justice didn't mince words. If the Trump administration actually revokes the roadless rule, we'll see them in court. So this is definitely heading towards litigation if the rule is formally rescinded.
So what does this all mean for you listening? We've got this major federal rule, one that had huge public backing when it started, now facing a serious challenge. And it really boils down to these fundamentally different views on how we should manage these vast public lands. Is it primarily for resource extraction, economic benefit, or is the focus environmental protection, biodiversity, climate?
And the wildfire issue complicates it further, used as justification by one side and challenged as perhaps a pretext or misguided by the other.
Right.
If you connect this to the bigger picture, it really highlights this constant tension, doesn't it, between conservation and development, how we manage public land for everyone, for future generations. It's a real clash of priorities.
A clash of priorities, and maybe even a clash of what we fundamentally believe our relationship with nature should be.
I think so. And it raises that tough question. How do we balance things?
Yeah.
Resource use, fire safety, ecosystem preservation, the long-term health of the planet, especially when the very words we use, like forest health or stewardship, can mean different things to different people.
So clearly, a very complex decision ahead, affecting millions of acres. The outcome will have huge implications, environmentally and economically. And the legal fights, as you said, seem almost guaranteed.
Definitely just beginning. Maybe a final thought for you to consider. When you hear these arguments about forest management and wildfire, think about how those definitions, forest health, ecosystem balance, how they're being framed. Because how we define those terms really shapes the policies. And those policies, they affect a lot more than just timber or fire season. They impact water, air, wildlife, things that affect all of us, long after the immediate debate fades.